Hey guys, thanks for checking out the My Career Path podcast. So today I have another special guest, Darrah Jakab, who is an architect here at an architectural company here in Utah. Go figure. And she was just awesome to talk to about collaboration, what kind of got her into it, how she changed from geology into architecture, and what keeps her going. So I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you're able to learn something from it, and let's get into it. All right, everybody, I have another special guest. I have Darrah Jakab here with me, a famous, world-renowned architect, right?
Right.
Well, perfect. Well, welcome to the show. We're happy to hear about your career path and kind of how you got started into architect. And so I'd love to just know a little bit more about you.
Well, I'm Darrah Jakab. I'm, let's see, how old am I now? Gosh, 41 now. Seems weird to say that. But I am an associate principal in sustainable design at MH Chan Architects. We're a large firm, legacy firm of about 90 people. We're about 100 years old, actually 100 years old this year.
Wow, congrats.
In
Centennial.
Salt Lake City, yeah. So it's a big firm and I love my job. Excited to talk about it.
This is a field that I haven't actually interviewed anyone in before. And so I'm excited to kind of hear your point of view, how you got into it. So How long have you been working as the associate principal?
I have been an associate principal for 2 years, but I've been doing the sustainability thing, kind of the director of sustainable design at the firm for 3 years.
Oh, awesome. So do you kind of oversee a team that kind of lead them on different designs and projects and things like that?
I oversee basically on a project by project basis. So I lead our teams through a process of establishing sustainability goals for projects and then devising strategies to achieve those goals.
Well, perfect. Well, I'd love to hear your story. Let's go over kind of your whole career path. What was the very first job you ever held?
Gosh, I was reflecting on this a little bit, and it's kind of funny, all the odd jobs I had. My first job was I was a cashier at a burger place called Charlie's Hamburgers, which is still in existence in Fort Worth, Texas. And it's this tiny little shack of a building that I'm trying to remember if it had air conditioning. I don't think it did. It was a fun summer job. Let's just say that. I was 14.
14, yeah, working the cash register. Awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, my first job was at Chick-fil-A, and I was
Nice.
back working the fries. So I think I was like 15 and a half or 16, and it was a brand new location. And so I remember the fast food. I don't know how populated or how much foot traffic, I guess I should say, that you got at your restaurant, but we had the busy season, and it was always getting fries ready and getting them going.
Oh yeah, there were some busy times for sure. Everybody needs their burgers and shakes, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, great. What about after that? You were a cashier at kind of a burger joint, and then where'd you go after that?
Then, while I was still in high school, I worked as a lifeguard for a couple summers. I watched kids in a daycare at a gym, and I worked at a pizza place.
Wow. Is that just like different summer jobs, just as you were kind of in high school and just kind of working through it?
Yep, summer jobs, just, making some extra money to do fun things, I guess.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then you get out of high school and you're finishing up summer jobs. Or did you go straight to college, or did you find other jobs there too?
Yep, I went straight to college right after I graduated high school, and I worked throughout school. So I always had a part-time job as I was going through my undergrad. I worked at a gift shop. I worked at a skateboard and snowboard shop. That was kind of primarily where I worked during my undergrad. I ran a smoothie stand at the farmers market.
Wow, you could have a whole shopping mall food court kind of going on.
I could, yeah. I was thinking about this. I worked at a lot of restaurants to begin with and kind of retail places. So that was kind of the theme of my early career, I guess you could say. But then as I got into college, I became a TA in one of my courses in my undergrad and started to kind of dip my toes into, I guess, the real world of what it's like having a job, really. And then that was kind of my undergrad. Is I was waiting tables, working restaurant jobs, working
How
as a
many hours
CNA.
did you typically work when you were kind of going to school? Because I know some
Um,
people, they do like 20 to 25. I did 35, and that was too much,
wow.
honestly. So,
Yeah. I'd say I was about 20,
okay.
25 maybe.
Okay. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so you graduate with your undergrad. What was your degree in?
I got my degree in geology,
Really?
actually. hmm
Okay. And then
Yep.
after you got your degree, kind of where'd you go from there?
So after I got my degree, and actually before I finished my undergrad degree, I realized that I would needed to nurture more of my creative side. And so I knew that I wasn't necessarily going to become a geologist.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I needed some more creative energy, and I wasn't quite going to be happy being a scientist. So I knew that sort of before I finished, and so I had it in my mind that as soon as I finished my undergrad, I was going to start right into grad school in architecture. That was kind of my decision. I could either switch majors late in the game and add a few more years to my undergrad and get my undergrad in architecture. But the nice thing about architecture is you can get your undergrad degree in anything, and then you can go into grad school in architecture, no problem.
Oh,
So,
I didn't know that.
yeah,
That it'll take like a broad view of a lot of different degrees, and then you can kind of go into architecture after. Do
yeah.
you know why that is? That seems kind of unique.
I really think, that's a great question why that is, but I think there's a lot of benefits to it because you do get a lot of diverse perspectives, and I think it's important to have that in architecture. There's so many different fields that it draws from
Mm-hmm.
that I came to the program, my grad program, with my background in geology. There were people that had degrees in music, English,
Really? That's
art.
awesome.
Yeah, so you kind of get this really well-rounded sort of perspective pool, I guess you could say. And that brings different things to the field of architecture. You just think about things differently, coming from different backgrounds, and it makes them for a more, I don't know, more robust and rich kind of practice. Yeah.
Well, and I think just even with you talking about how creative it is, that's something that I'd never really thought about before, but makes a lot of sense. Is there's so much more of creativity with architecture. You can appreciate different buildings and structures, but then also have that same motivation to create your own. And so having people with backgrounds in music or whatever else, and just seeing that kind of all combine into new structures and new formations and things like that, I think that's really cool and something I hadn't really thought about before.
Yeah, it's a nice melting pot of a lot of different things. Even just the field of architecture itself is very far reaching. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
things you have to kind of think about and balance and juggle all the time. And so if you've got practice thinking about different ways of thinking about things, that's a benefit for sure.
What was kind of the biggest push to get you from geology to architecture? Was it that kind of creative outlet?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because when I first started college at UNM, University of New Mexico, I
Mm-hmm.
took one of those. I didn't come into college thinking I know exactly what degree I'm going to get. I came in thinking I'm going to take a few generals, I'm going to kind of dabble in a few different things and see what piques my interest. And I went to the counseling center and I took one of those career tests where you take a test and it sort
Yeah,
of
like the
matches you
aptitude
with,
tests. Uh huh.
yes. And it matched me with architecture. And I really kind of blew it off. I thought, oh, that's strange. That's not right. That's wrong.
Yeah.
And I never really thought about it. And I ended up kind of taking the long meandering path back full circle there. And I sort of pursued science, I pursued art, even business, and sort of came around to a realization that it really is architecture that combines all those things for me. And realized, okay, well, now I'm looking at my credits. Like I said, I could either take a few years longer and do architecture, or I could just finish with my geology degree. So that's what I did. Mm-hmm.
Nice. Well, let's talk about kind of your grad school and going into architecture. How do you think that's helped you in your career?
Oh gosh. Grad school in architecture is a bit of a gauntlet. It's a bit of a sink or swim kind of situation. It's very intense, it's
Mm-hmm.
very demanding, and I think it prepares people for the profession in a way. I don't know if there's another similar sort of
Kind of
field that
outlet.
does
Yeah.
this, but it essentially you're thrown into a situation, especially when you don't come from a background in architecture. You're thrown into a situation where you're asked to come up with solutions to problems and projects, and use software that you've never used before or develop skills you've never had before in a very quick amount of time. It's all done in a studio. So there's a very strong studio culture in architecture school. And the studio is essentially a place where all the students work
Mm-hmm.
and they work on their projects together. And it's a very inspiring and chaotic place, but it's great. There's sort of evidence of all the projects that people are working on, and so you can kind of see these projects sort of develop and manifest before your eyes. It's very cool. And I think that was a great way to prepare you for the profession because it it forces you to work with others, to ask questions, to collaborate. Even when you're in an individual project, you're constantly like bouncing ideas off of others or
Yeah.
looking for inspiration. It was a great way to, I guess, be introduced to this field, which is so rich and fun.
Yeah, and I think especially just with kind of the creative outlet, I'm just going to keep coming back to that because that's nothing that I thought of like architecture. I'm like, it's very structured. It's very, everyone has a set mind. But I think especially in creating something from nothing, being able to bounce ideas off each other and see it kind of come to fruition, I think that's incredibly rewarding. And I would think you would agree.
Absolutely. It's pretty incredible. And I had no preconceived notions when I went into architecture school. I knew roughly what it was. I took my prerequisites and things, but
Mm-hmm.
kind of being thrown into that environment really just it forces you to think about things differently, and I it's incredibly rewarding and inspiring.
Yeah. Is there anyone in your career path that has kind of helped you really fulfill your job or really kind of see things differently that you hadn't thought before? Any mentors that you've had?
Gosh, that's a great question. I was thinking about this earlier, and here at my current job, here in my current firm, there was a few years ago, there was a posting put up internally just saying, hey, we're looking for design architects. And this is when I was still an intern, essentially, and just kind of doing a lot of grunt work and just
Yeah.
trying to get my feet wet. And I saw the posting for a design architect, and I had just recently become licensed. And I saw that and I thought, oh, that's cool. They're looking for people, not me. I couldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought I would do that. I just thought, oh, well, it'll be interesting to see who applies. And I was approached by someone in our firm and was told, hey, Darrah, we're, we would really hope that you apply for this. We're really hoping you do it. And I was totally shocked because I didn't think that people were sort of thinking those things about me. And
They
so
were
it made
aware
me
of you
think,
as an intern.
yeah, I got very encouraged and kind of mustered the strength to put my hat into the ring, and I got the job. So that was really cool. I felt very kind of supported in a way that I hadn't before. So
Mm-hmm.
that was an awesome little experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just to know that people are aware of you and know that your work is actually important.
Yeah, totally. Exactly.
Great. How many people do you work with, like in your team or at the place you work, have that kind of grad school background?
Good question. I would say anyone who's an architect does. So that's a requirement.
Okay.
So most of the architects in the firm do. We have interior designers and landscape
Mm-hmm.
architects here as well, and urban planners. So urban planning and interior design does not require a grad program. Landscape architects and architects do.
too.
In
Okay.
order to get that licensure. There is a path through for landscape architects to become licensed, essentially working under a licensed architect for a number of years,
Oh,
kind of
so like
becoming an
similar to a trade
apprentice.
school almost, like a
Mhm.
journeyman that goes around.
Exactly.
Oh, that's way cool.
But yeah, I would say most of the people I work with have that grad school background just because I work on project teams with architects primarily, but some of the other trades in the office don't need it.
Cool. Well, that's good
Yeah.
to know. I like knowing about what kind of requirements come up, especially for anyone looking at architecture as like a potential career. I think it's just helpful to know what a path looks like. What do I need? What do I need to kind of check off my list to actually be considered or kind of, throw my hat in the
Mhm.
ring, like you said.
Totally.
Good.
Yeah, it's definitely a commitment to I never really thought that I would go to grad school when I first started in college.
Hmm.
I thought, gosh, I one day I'm going to get a degree in something and that
Exactly.
will be it. I never really thought I would go to grad school, but knowing the path I ended up pursuing needed that, it was kind of a no-brainer. And it was an additional 3.5 years after.
Whew.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So it is, you got to have the wherewithal to want to take that on for sure. It's not for the faint of heart.
That's good. Well, and I think you're not alone, and that's definitely the feeling that I've had, especially after getting my degree this the last few years. Is just I always thought I'd go to college, I'd get my degree, and then suddenly just a career would fall in my lap. I'd work there for 30 to 40, 50 years, however long, I'd retire, and then that's it. But the more I
Yep.
talk with people, the more I'm like, there are so many people who are like, I have no idea. I went to college because that's what
Yeah.
I was told to do, and then it just kind of happened.
Yep. That's kind of what happens. But I do think that it's valuable going to school, whether you have a one track
Hmm.
mind on something in particular or you hope to find your path in school. I do think that it is a good place to find your path. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, I think you also just kind of get your feet wet. You get to see, especially in taking generals, which I know
Mhm.
people, how they feel about generals, it's a nice way to kind of get a feeling for what you like and what you don't like, especially for those of us that didn't know what we wanted to do. And I think even some
Exactly.
of us who like we go into college, I had several friends who were like, I'm going in, I'm getting this degree, and then I'm going to have this job, and it's going to go. And then 2 years or 3 years into school, they go, you know what? I think I might want to change to something else, and then they end up just staying in school for longer, which is fine if you find out what you want to do. But there's not really a concrete path that you follow. It just kind of
No,
happens.
no. And you start to kind of figure out what you're drawn to and what you really kind of light up about, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah, when you were saying that, it made me think of a physics class, or was it, it might have been a chemistry class I took that was a prerequisite for my geology degree, but it was also prerequisites for people pursuing pre-med. So
Hmm.
you got people in there thinking, I'm going to become a doctor. And it was very soon after like the first major exam that there was a lot of people that weren't going to make it.
Yeah.
It's kind of it really is the sink or swim mentality there too, a little bit, where if you really can't hang with this, it's just going to get harder and
It's
harder. You
yeah.
should really rethink your path.
Just jumping in here real quick to share a website I've used and will continue to use to improve myself and my career. Skillshare is an online learning community with over 20,000 classes to choose from. Whatever you're passionate about, you can find an amazing class on Skillshare to hone your practice. Skillshare has what you need. Learning is so critical for our lives and is a lifelong journey. Even when we finish school, we should keep on learning and keep working to improve ourselves. So you can try Skillshare absolutely free for 1 month. Go to Skillshare.com and sign up and use the code MyCareerPathFree. That's all lowercase, no spaces, to start your first month at no charge. And when you do decide to keep on taking those classes, use the code MyCareerPath30, that's MyCareerPath30, to get 30% off your first year on Skillshare. Keep learning and keep going. And now let's get back to the show. So kind of explain what you do on a daily basis. What does a normal day look like for you?
Oh gosh, Nowadays, there was, let's see, I think I had 4 or 5 meetings today. So I would say primarily what I do is a lot of communication. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of coordination, a lot of communication, a lot of collaboration going on in
Mm-hmm.
order to execute projects. There's just no way that one person can do these things on their own with large projects that I work on. So there's just, yeah, lots of just continually checking in with your team, understanding where everybody's at and what problems are happening, what are things that the team sort of needs to focus and rally around to
Mm-hmm.
kind of figure out together is primarily what we try to do. Working through issues, working through details, working through problems, sketching out ideas, honestly communicating and collaborating. That's the
It's
gist
one of
of
the
it.
biggest parts, huh?
Mhm.
What's kind of your favorite part of your job?
Oh gosh. Let's see. My favorite part is honestly, it's really nice when a project, because the project timelines that I work on are long. So a project will start planning, and sometimes it won't be completed for 5 years. So
Oh,
yeah, so beginning a project and seeing it through to its end is really fulfilling, sort of in the early pre-design phases, planning phases, and then setting out the goals and the intentions for the project early on. And then when it's completed, being able to see, wow, there's some things that we really were able to capture here and maintain throughout the whole process. This sometimes, yeah, 3, 4, or 5 year process that you can point to and say, we actually accomplished that. That's great,
we
and
did that.
we did it. We did it. We said we're going to do it, and we did it. And I think also just kind of being able to step back and see that project that you worked on is bringing people together, it's becoming part of a community, it's becoming sort of embedded in its place. And, well, there wasn't something there now, but now there is. And that what you were able to do is beyond the efforts of one individual. It's really a group effort, and it's really, really cool to see it all come together.
Well, I'll ask you this too, because this is a story that my wife tells me all the time about her dad. And because he works on contracting, he helps people out, remodel, refinish, and whatnot. And whenever they're driving through a neighborhood, he goes, I helped build that. I helped with that. I helped with that. Do you get that same kind of a sense if you're driving through an area and you're like, ah, oh, that's mine?
Let's see, I probably can point to 5 to 10 projects that have been like completed and like I've been part of. And so it's probably not as many as your
Yeah.
father-in-law, but it is cool to drive by a project and be like, there it is. It's
Yeah.
in use. Oh, it's so cool. It's doing its thing, and it is very cool.
Well, that's funny. I did construction work for a summer
Mm-hmm.
during college, and there's like 3 buildings here in Logan that anytime I drive by, my wife will make fun of me because I sound like her dad, because I'm just like, oh, you see that siding, that metal siding right there?
I
I
did
did that. Yeah, exactly.
that.
There's
Yep.
I just think you get that sense of pride, and I think especially in your line of work where you just kind of see that, hey, we did this whole thing from start to finish, and it's done. People like it, people use it, and I think that's really really fulfilling.
Yeah, it's also something unique and special when it's something tangible, like something that's real that you can touch.
Hmm.
Sometimes we work on things that sort of live in the internet or in some spreadsheet somewhere, and you don't really get to see. It doesn't have as much satisfaction when you can kind of touch it, hold it, point to it, and kind of watch it sort of live its own life.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. What would you say is one of your favorite projects that you work on? What's one that kind of sticks out in your mind?
One of my favorite projects was for actually USU. We did the new academic building down in Moab, and
Okay.
that opened last year. And that was a really, really fun project to work on. That's going to be tracking to be a net positive energy project.
Hmm,
So it actually
nice.
generates more energy than it consumes. yeah, that was a really awesome client and process. That was really good.
Well, that's way cool. What would you say is probably the most difficult part of your job or your career right now?
Kind of that double-edged sword when you think about all the things that are rewarding, that make it great, all the things that come together, all the different facets of architecture that make it interesting are also
Mm-hmm.
the things that make it overwhelming.
Mm.
Sometimes it can be very complex. There's a lot of moving parts and yeah, there's just it can be overwhelming with all the things that need to be orchestrated and understood. You've got mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structure, your civil kind of street utilities, interiors, landscape, acoustics, code, sustainability. There's so many things that you have to kind of consider and layer into a project in a cohesive way that it's difficult. It's not easy. So I would say that's the most challenging thing is just being able to juggle all of it and kind of not get bogged down by it.
Well, I think even just going back to what you're talking about communications at the start, where it's just you have all of these different moving pieces where everyone is kind of an expert in their own field and making sure we're all on the same page towards that same project. I'm sure that's a lot to juggle.
It is.
Yeah. Well,
It is. But we try to make it better every time. You work on a project, you go through the process and you just try to reflect on what was good about that, what was worth repeating, what's not. Let's try to make the next process better.
do you guys like frequently do like performance review or like a team review after a project that kind of went like, hey, this went really well, this went really poorly. How can we make this happen more and those happen less?
Yeah, we're trying to do that more and more. So we are starting to integrate this process called Scrum. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's
No.
essentially a way of working on projects with teams. It's essentially a team focused way of organizing complex projects. So you essentially do just that. Like you said, you intermittently throughout the course of a project, you take an interval of time and say, let's reflect on what the last 2 weeks or the last month sort of effort was and
Mm-hmm.
really kind of think about these are the things that were good, these are the things that weren't good. Let's try this out next time and just really um, trying to learn from lessons, I guess, and also just trying to kind of continuously get better and better requires that to be built into your process and for you to practice it.
And it was called Scrum, like a
Scrum,
rugby scrum.
like a rugby scrum.
No, I haven't heard that term before. I knew lean efficiency, you
It's
know,
related.
it's
It's
related to
related.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Scrum core team. Well, that's cool. Yeah, I'll have to look
Yeah.
into that. I think that's a neat way. I always think that's one of the more difficult things, especially when you have so many different teams and organizations working on a project. Like just making sure people are on the same page. So how has that helped you guys kind of communicate better?
It's it's forced us to really um, to clarify our roles, to understand what tasks are ahead of us in detail,
Mm-hmm.
and make sure everybody's on the same page with that. It's forced us to check in more often. And that's probably the antithesis of what people want to hear, like checking in, more meetings. Sometimes that can be a barrier in itself or just
Mm-hmm.
kind of something to be overcome because it's more time to be spent away from the work you're doing on the project, but it really kind of reorients the work. Instead of it happening in your own head in your own world, it's really happening as a team and in a group setting. So it's just made us kind of recalibrate those things, and it's been really great to experiment with because it's not a one size fit all. This is the answer to make
Yeah.
things runs more smoothly. It just is a tool. So it's just been nice to try and hone that a little bit.
Yeah. So with the team that you work with and the people that you work with, what are some of the traits that really stand out to you?
That's a good question. I think having, you know, it really depends on what you are doing at the time. We've been also sort of experimenting with the idea of the six hats thinking, which is essentially depending on what type of outcome you're trying to get out of a meeting or a workshop or some kind of get together, putting on a different hat or putting on a certain hat makes you kind of more likely to come up with the outcome that you want. So if you're really trying to come up with ideas, you put on the green hat, and that's about creativity. Or if you're really trying to scrutinize something and point out all the pinch points or the issues or the problems, you put on your black hat, and that's really about kind of judging things and being
Mm-hmm.
methodical. So I do think that depending on the project and the setting and the situation, it's really nice to have just in general open-mindedness and kind of having an openness to, listening to what others can bring to a conversation and having that, I guess, ability to kind of listen and integrate that into what you're thinking. Sometimes you can get really one track mind and I think this is how it has to be, but if you can be open minded about what others might be able to bring to it, it becomes better. So I think having that mindset is really great in the people that I work with. And then there's some really, really just brilliant, amazing technical people that know a lot more than I do. And I really do like to kind of pick people's brains on certain things. And it's nice to have to work in a firm that's large where you get kind of the full spectrum of people and abilities so you can really tap into those resources when you need them.
So someone who's able to learn from others as well as just kind of think a little bit outside of their own perspective, kind of change and understand where people are coming from a little bit better.
Yeah, that's always great to have on your team.
I'm going to kind of pitch you a scenario. Let's say you are hiring for your team. You have different applications or resumes that come in. What are some main things that you look for in someone potentially wanting to do architecture?
Oh gosh, good question. I think just being sort of a similar mindset that I was talking about, having an open
Mm-hmm.
mindset, because I think if you come to a table with the idea that you can figure things out, that it can be figured out, that's a really great place to start from. I think just being able to kind of troubleshoot and problem solve and be nimble and kind of be able to pivot whenever the situation calls for it, that's something that's really, really great. I think just sort of being able to take information and analyze it in ways that you might not thought of before. That's another great trait
Mm-hmm.
to have. To just be able to see things through different lenses is a good trait to have. And I think just having that kind of inherent resiliency of just, you know what, there's a lot of things happening, but just being able to kind of stay focused and centered on the kind of project at hand is another great trait.
Well, perfect. Darrah, I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of talk with me and share your story and some of your tips and advice. One last thing, I love asking people about funny or humorous work stories that they look back on and just kind of laugh and realize. Do you have any stories like that you'd be willing to share?
I was like thinking about this. I think the thing that comes to mind, I was in grad school. This is where I really questioned what I was doing with my life. I so we call them all-nighters, and this is something
Mm-hmm.
that if you ever go to architecture school, you'll become familiar with. It's when you're working on a project and you have a critique the next day where you've got your professors and your colleagues and your peers and they all look at your project together and they pick it apart and talk about how great or how not great it is.
Yeah.
And it can be a stressful situation. So,
Oh,
and
I'm
you, of
sure.
course,
Yeah.
you want to make your project great and you want to work on it to the last minute. So you stay up all night to do that. So it was one of those situations. And so I stayed up all night in the studio and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna get a couple hours of shut eye, but I'm not gonna go home. I'm gonna go sleep where I know there's a couch and it's in the bathroom. So there was this we had a bathroom that had this kind of entry area with a couch for some reason. And I just knew that that was there. So I decided I'd take my jacket and put it over me and sleep there. And so I got in the bathroom and started sleeping about 4 in the morning and was awakened about maybe 7 as the people who were going to their 8 o'clock classes were getting to the building. And I just woke up from just thinking, oh man, what am I doing with my life?
Sleeping in
maybe
bathrooms.
need to think things through. But I had
That's
a good
awesome.
crit the next day, so it kind of
Hey, it paid off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you have it, guys. I hope you were able to enjoy this episode, learn something a little bit about architecture. I know I did, especially just as that creative element that I just had never really thought of before. So if you like this episode, make sure to leave a 5-star review. Make sure to follow me on Instagram, Facebook, connect with me on social media, or send me an email, colten, COLTEN, at mycareerpathpodcast.com. Until next time, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Catch you later.